before I begin, I just want to say a word of thanks to everyone who participated in the talent show last night, for the volunteers and the talent, and it was really wonderful. I have to give a special mention to Joe Herzer because I was just sitting here, and next thing I knew, I was home. And it turns out he made me disappear at the end of his act. I didn't know he could do that, so I'm kind of going to hang on to the podium today. But thank you, Joe. But it really was a wonderful. We raised some, I don't know the amount, but we raised money to send our teens to the Center for Spiritual Living Youth Camp, which is just an amazing experience. When they come back, we'll have a couple of them come up and tell you about it. But it's a week in which they are absolutely accepted as who they are. And I've seen some really tough kids go there and come back transformed because they're not used to having that experience. And but it's one of the best things that our movement does. So to support that is really a good thing. Okay, so you must be present to win. Actually, I stole this title from Reverend Patrick Farron out in Kauai, because when we were out there a while back, this was his topic for the following week. I thought, I like that. I'm going to use that topic. And I have no idea what he was going to talk about, but the title was good. And it really speaks to a basic principle of our teaching, and that is the idea of being present, being fully present, fully available. Another term for it would be to be grounded in principle. And one of my favorite sayings in metaphysics is to occupy the space you occupy. And what does that mean? It means, again, to be available, to be fully present, to be in your right mind as you experience your life. And it's not always an easy thing to do because we tend to be, as human beings, we tend to get conditioned to think in patterns. We tend to kind of get lost in our thoughts. We tend to, old patterns renew themselves in habitual ways of thinking. We get distracted. When something comes up, we tend to go into maybe our emotional self reacts and we get carried off in a certain direction. Anybody ever say anything they regretted saying? Yeah, I'm not going to even ask you to raise your hand because I know you probably have, and you might regret raising your hand, so we don't want to. But why does that happen? It happens because we say you might have spoken before you thought. You kind of reacted out of an old pattern or an emotional set of some kind that really wasn't the best version of you. So when I say occupy the space you occupy, it means to be fully present, fully available in consciousness as the world happens. Krishnamurti had this great saying. He said, people ask me why I'm never upset. He says, because I don't care what happens. And you think about that. And we are conditioned to care, aren't we? We're conditioned to be concerned. If you're, the saying, if you're not outraged, you're not paying attention. There's a lot of that in our culture because our experience seems to indicate that if we don't get upset, that wrongs don't get righted, that injustices prevail. But I think if you pay attention to that, you might find that that's not necessarily so. And certainly, sometimes when people get upset, things do get corrected. But they don't necessarily get corrected in a healthy way. Because the person or the people that then have to do the correcting, it might be leadership or something, they resent having to do that way. And they harbor that resentment. And then what happens to resentment? Like any other emotion, you pass it forward, or pay it forward, as we say. There's that wonderful idea of paying good deeds forward, where maybe somebody in line pays your toll when you get up there and they said they paid for you, and then the idea would be you would do a good deed later on. And that's a great thing to do. We have to kind of do that consciously, but resentment, we pay forward automatically. We kind of go into the banking business, and somebody says something that upsets you and you don't like it. You say, well, that doesn't bother me. But yeah, chalk one up. And then you chalk another one up. And then somebody else says, and you chalk something up. Pretty soon your account is so full, it's time to start paying people back with interest. And it doesn't even have to be the people that upset you to begin with. Because maybe sometimes you can't say anything. Maybe it's your boss or something like that, and you can't say anything to them, so you go home and kick the cat, you know? Or you take it out on the other motorists on the highway, you know? How many of you are driving around going, happy motoring to everyone? Yeah, yeah, because that guy that cut me off back up by Agora Hills, I'm going to get somebody else on the 405. Then I'll feel better. But it doesn't work that way. That's not occupying the space I occupy. That's being a reactive mechanism operating at a very surface level. And the more we do that, the more harm we do in our world. Not intentional harm, not trying to mess things up, but the more of that energy that we send forth into that collective field of human consciousness, the more it affects everyone else. You know? I don't know if you know, there's a thing called the news. And there's television, and they have newspapers. They have newspapers, and they have on the internet. There's news. Some of it's accurate. Some of it isn't. So these are some shots from this week. The Veterans Affairs issue, you may have heard about. Some of you are hearing this for the first time. I'm sorry if I'm upsetting you. The shooting up in Santa Barbara. This is Syria, where Syria is only a part of a pan-national civil war that's going on from Afghanistan through Iraq, through Syria, through Jordan, into Egypt. Shiite against Sunni. And that there happen to be some national borders in the way, but really what's going on is a much larger thing. This is the Ukraine, where they've had some tussles with Russia and a couple of elections, and Nigeria, where the schoolgirls were kidnapped. So there's a lot in the news that might not be too cheerful. And people often say to me, you know, should I watch the news? Should I pay attention to what's going on? And we even had, there was in the last couple of weeks on the ministers, we have a listserv where the ministers kind of share ideas and complain about you people. I don't know what's wrong with my congregation. No, but the thing came up about the news. Somebody posted something on one of these stories, and there were some comments that came up. Well, I don't watch the news. I don't want to know what's in the news. I don't want to be reminded of what's in the news. And if you're going to put stuff from the news on this listserv, I'm leaving the listserv. And there are other people that said, I think it's important for a minister to be up on what's going on so you can talk about current events because your congregants may be having issues with it. It's nice to know what's happening so we can be current. Now, I'm not saying either one of those is right. In fact, both of those responses may be the correct response for that person. Because can I watch the news and be present? Can I be in principle as I look at the world around me? Joseph Campbell talks about the idea of living joyfully in the sorrows of the world. And what he means is to see the radiance everywhere, beginning in yourself. Or are we taken off balance and into the reactive mechanism by what happens, by what's portrayed? There's a very interesting column in the New York Times this morning. Full disclosure, I pay attention to the news. By Frank Bruni, one of the columnists, and he talks about what's happening in journalism across the various media. And I think he has a good point. He says, it's no longer about the story, it's about igniting opinion on Twitter and on on the news outlets, because he says, here's the reality, and he says, I'm part of it. It's cheaper to have me give my opinion of the news, or to go have cable news, have a bunch of people come on and shout at each other, than it is to have bureaus with reporters who dig into the story and get to the bottom of it. So journalism has drifted, and he says it's also because the audiences seem to like it. So we've collectively conspired to create this place where the normal thing we do after a circumstance, after something is reported, is we huddle up with our ideological counterparts, usually on the media. We turn on what's going on in this channel. I'm supposed that my people are then we hear what they say, and then we go out and say it to other people. And it's usually kind of a lot of resentment in it. Have you noticed? It's kind of interesting. Mahatma Gandhi said, the future depends on what we do in the present. See, the present isn't just something you can ride out and hope things get better. It's a creative field. And tomorrow is being created today in our own minds and hearts, in our consciousness, in us individually, and in any group that we're a part of, up to the entire human race and the whole planet. We are putting energy into that field, and the quality of the energy is either something that's going to cause the future to be more uplifted or less. Now, can any one of us completely change the future for the whole planet? No. You may be able to influence other people, but that's still going to have some kind of a limited effect. I don't think any of us influences everyone on the planet, nor do we need to. But you do have an absolute degree of dominion over your own field and your own future. Am I going to be batted about like a ping pong ball by these waves of opinion, or the waves of whatever it is? Doesn't have to be about the news. It could be what's going on in your relationship in your home. What goes on when you try to make improvements in your kids' schools? What goes on? See, the style that's been adopted across our culture is showing up everywhere. The last time we had an election in Centers for Spiritual Living, there were little signs that it was starting to look like U.S. politics. Just little ones, because we know we're not supposed to be that way. But it's so tempting. Let me do a little negative research on whoever's running against the person I want to vote for. You know? Well, I hear their center isn't doing so well. You know. The future depends on what we do in the present. And what we do in the present is determined by the thoughts and feelings that we generate within our own consciousness. So how do I engage is the question, I guess. How do I engage from a place of presence? How do I engage in a place where parts of me, even though I may want to hold that high watch and want to be in that good space, there are parts of me that were, there's just so much energy in a good argument. There's so much energy in feeling righteous and making the other person wrong. But is that the highest and best? Is that the best way for me to spend my present that's creating my future? It's a tough one. It's a tough one. Einstein said, "You are living, you occupy space, you have a mass, therefore you matter." Occupy the space you occupy. Be the best version of yourself. And here's something else. Here's where here's where maybe it isn't that hard. It's okay to do it imperfectly, because you will. I get into a couple political discussions on Facebook this week, and I felt so right. And as soon as I hit send, I said, oh man, why did I do that? Nothing good is coming from this. Because, it turned out that my amazing command of the facts didn't change anybody's opinion. So I'm not going to do that anymore. Because, it even can be fun to do that, but it can only be fun to do that if everybody agrees it's going to be fun. Otherwise, it's just trying to defend your own ego need to be right. It's not about who's right so much as it is about who expresses the most love. Love is all you need. One of my minister friends gave a talk one time called Love is All You Need, and he said, I told my son, who's 4, love is all you need. And my son said, well, what about food? You need food? And he goes, yeah, you're right. Okay, so love and food is all you need. And his son said, well, what about mommy? Right, love and food and mommy. We need that. Says, what about our house? Okay, love and food and mommy and our house. What about grandma? But 4-year-old theology is very profound, very practical. But in reality, all those things that the child talked about are love. Love is all we need because love is all we are. And we sometimes, we say, well, gee, anything that's hurtful or anything that's nasty or anything that isn't productive isn't love, is it? Yeah, that's all there is. I've mentioned many times the quote from Ken Keyes, who said, all human behavior is the expression of love. Some of it's skillful and some of it's unskillful. Because the same energy is flowing into us and we determine what to do with it. The energy itself is the love. It's like the electricity flowing into the building. We can use it in we might say, a positive way to light the lights and have the screens go, or we could install an electric chair back in the corner, and if you didn't give enough in the offering. During the course of the month, we could say, well, after the service today, the lights may dim a little bit. And you might say, well, that's a negative use of the energy. Yeah, but the energy itself is still the pure potential of whatever it can be. That same electricity that runs the electric chair would also run the lights if it was simply there were a light at the end of the wire. So the same energy that flowed into Hitler flowed into Mother Teresa, flowed into Gandhi, flowed into Martin Luther King, flowed into Einstein, flows into you and me. And we determine what we do with it. We express it skillfully or unskillfully, and we have to learn how to do that. Some of it's innate, some of it we know how to be kind and everything, but other stuff we have to learn. We have to learn how to rise above our own emotional, egoic needs sometimes when they're not based in our highest and best. Stand a little taller, even if it's uncomfortable. Sometimes we have to say in a conversation with a bunch of people, can we change the subject? Rather than continue to be in a place of complaint and upset. I don't want to live in a state of concern. To be concerned is to use love unskillfully. I want to know the best. I want to live from that place of good expectation. Well, won't you be let down a lot? No, because if you're really in that place of good expectation, here's the key, try to get it. Other people can't let you down. Only you can. I'm going to say that again. Other people can't let you down. Only you can. And you can only be let down by other people when you've given them permission to have that power in your life. So we end up with a country right now where, most people aren't even paying attention. I don't know if you know that or not. They just had a very important election in Texas this week, a primary, and 1.5% of the registered Democrats voted, and 6.8% of the registered Republicans voted. And let's call it a democracy. Most people aren't even paying attention. They're watching the playoffs or something. I don't know what they're doing. How much authority do you want to give that 1% or that 6.8% over how you feel about the world? And I'm not saying don't participate. I'm saying participate from a place of being present and grounded. Be present to your own power. Because the reality is, no matter what's going on in the outer world, you can have a good life. Not that it won't be affected in some way, but you can have a good life if you're reduced down to one room and you can't go out of that room. If you're in a prison cell, you can have a good life. You can have a good life whether whatever your political desires are met or not. If you want more government or less government and you don't get it, you can still have a good life. If you want your kids to look up to you and respect you and they don't, you can still have a good life. If I want this center to be in financial surplus and we're not, I can still have a good life. The condition may not be up to me fully, but my experience of the condition is fully up to me. That's the power I have. And people may say, well, you're crazy if you don't let this stuff affect you. Great. If in order to be happy I have to be defined as crazy, I'm crazy. Think about it. Think about what sanity means in our culture. It means being pissed off all the time and feeling cheated out of what you're entitled to. Think about that. That's the larger game that's being played out. Not just in politics, in every arena. Poor Donald Sterling said some stupid things and had to sell his team and only got $2 billion for it. I see some of you going, if you let that bother you, you're going to suffer immeasurably in your life. Because there is nothing you can do about it. Who cares? Let him have his money. Who cares? So what? Things ought to be different. No shit. They are the way they are. Joseph Campbell says, until you learn to accept the world as it is and teach people how to live in it, you will suffer. If you're waiting for the world to get better before you'll be happy, I hope you have many lifetimes. Because the world is what it is. And again, to quote Campbell, the world is perfect. It's a mess. It's always been a mess. Why should it be any different for you? Life lives on life. You know, we say, well, if we go back before human beings, it was very peaceful. Yeah, unless you were dinner. And if you weren't the biggest thing happening, you were dinner. Or a snack. And even if you were the biggest thing happening, you still had to catch the damn food. That's no fun. You didn't have a supermarket to go to. You see what we do to ourselves? To justify some sense of lack within us, we make everything wrong. And we wallow in the wrongness. And we make ourselves suffer in the wrongness by thinking it shouldn't be so wrong. What if it's not wrong? What if it's right? What if everything that exists is part of an evolutionary pathway to the realization of full human potential, but we're still a few thousand generations away from it? See, asking our culture to be perfect is like asking a 4-year-old to run Harvard. It may happen someday, but it ain't going to happen today. But you, within yourself, can be enough. You, within yourself, can do nothing to add to the chaos, can do nothing to add to the discord, and can do everything you can to add to the amount of love that is skillfully expressed, even if other people don't want to hear it. Maya Angelou was listening to a radio show on NPR, actually on the way home last night, as Gus had me Joe had me teleported out of here somewhere. And but I was listening to NPR on the way home, and they had an old interview with Maya Angelou, and her son was there, and she was talking about this poem she used to share with her son, and I didn't catch the author's name, but one of the lines in the poem was, "I will die, but I will give no more to death than that." And it was a poem from the days of slavery. And one of the other lines is, "I will not tell the authorities that there's a black boy hiding in the swamp behind my house. I will not give that to death." The idea that we all owe the universe a physical death, but we will do nothing else to contribute to the death of anyone or anything else to the best of our abilities. She said, that's what I taught my son. What if we just did that? We didn't gossip. We didn't run other people down. We didn't criticize. Unless it was our role. I mean, if you're someone's supervisor, you need to give them an evaluation. But what if you did that as lovingly as you could and as honestly and openly as you could, without any hidden agendas, without any sidebars, without resenting them in some way? What if you could be like one of those counselors that works with our teens when they go to camp, and no matter what those kids do, they are loved for who they are. They don't have to change to get that. It's already theirs. And some of those kids, it takes them 3 or 4 days to even begin to accept that idea. It's the first time they've ever heard it. And I can't tell you how many parents come up to me afterward and say, "What'd you do to my kid?" "What do you mean?" "He's being totally cooperative around the house, and we think he's up to something." I said, "No, he's just being who he is. Enjoy it. And allow it." We're so hard on it. See, we're hard on others because we're hard on ourselves. If you had friends that talk to you the way you talk to yourself sometimes, would they still be your friends, or would they be your friends very long? See? So that's where it has to begin. In order for love to be expressed outward in any kind of a meaningful way, it has to be expressed inward. It has to come from a loving being, or it's false. It's the people that tell you, you gotta care, and if you care, you'll be pissed off. That's a person that doesn't love themselves very much. because that's the only way you can say that's a good attitude. Our friends Lisa and Erica, who have been here, have a song that says, if you're not in awe, you're not paying attention. And you know what? When I heard that for the first time, deep down I said yes, and they're closer to the surface. I said, oh, no. And that tells me something. See, listen to your inner guidance. Your heart doesn't lie to you. Your emotions may. See what the deepest part of you says, how it resonates. You know, when I was on Facebook and got into those conversations, and I wasn't really derogatory, I was just kind of, you know, being funny. Same thing. I know that. Same thing. The deepest part of me said, what are you doing? This doesn't feel good. And closer to the surface is, yeah, got him. And that's what I went with. And I have to own that. Yeah, I will. I'll get over it. But it's not just forgive myself, it's go forth and sin no more. Go forth and sin no more. Where have you contributed to the negative vibe of the human race in the past week? That if you had it to do over again, you would do it differently. But you don't get a do-over, really, you know? You can't take words back. You can't take attitude back. So that's okay. Forgive, learn, move on. So this week, if I'm in the same situation, I'm going to do something different. And it might be very disturbing to the other people because they used to be able to count on me to play their games. But what if I can't be counted on to play those games anymore? What if I no longer look to the talking heads on TV for my talking points during the week? What if instead of spending time dwelling in that stuff, I read something uplifting, or I listen to beautiful music, or I take a walk on the beach or in the forest, and I let myself contemplate the beauty? Then I have that conversation. So here's my recommendation. If you can handle the news, watch the news. If you can't handle it, go on a diet. Put it aside for a while you build up your inner reserve and your inner sense of presence and strength, while you learn to occupy the space you occupy fully. And you don't need to make anybody else wrong so that you can feel right. Because you know what? Whatever side you're on, if the other side wins, the world won't end. And even if it does, you won't. So as Krishnamurti said, the reason I don't get upset is because I don't care what happens. Because there's good in everything. And so it is.